don't know who Lyn Ulbricht is, Lyn Ulbricht is the mother of Ross Ulbricht, the man accused of creating and running the Silk Road website. Yeah, although she has no private information about the case, she's not a lawyer, she's in very close communication with Ross and his attorney. And she's learned from the attorney how the outcome of this case will set precedent, influence new law, and impact every person in this room's freedom and constitutional rights. Something happens to your kid, it's really hard. And I know that this will probably be very heartfelt and really informative, especially considering what this can do. So, and if any of you are familiar with the Silk Road, or you're not, you know what's going on. So, give a round of applause to Lyn Ulbricht.
But I can say that anyone who knows Ross agrees with what I have to say about him. And in fact, Roger Ver recently tweeted that a reporter told him that he was struggling to find anyone to say anything negative about Ross. And that does not surprise me one bit. I'm also not going to talk about the Silk Road case today. I don't have any private information about it. Now, I could go on about all the holes, inconsistencies, things that don't make sense, and things that I think are lies in the case. But I don't want to do that either. What I want to do is look past the fog of sensationalism and controversy that is swirling around this case and kind of part that curtain and take a glimpse at what is lurking behind it. And it's something far more dangerous than any website could ever be. And that is what our government has become and how they operate. Now, they're not shy about who they are. They will tell you right out. They say it right in their official papers who they are. Now, I warn you, it's very painful to read because they're incredibly arrogant and intentionally intimidating. But it's there. And for example, in their opposition to the defense's motions last April, they stated federal laws are expansive and adaptable. And then they went on to apply it especially to the internet. Now, I would like to know by what authority a federal prosecutor can expand law. Because I know that it's not the Constitution. The Fifth Amendment of the Bill of Rights says laws cannot be expansive or broadly applied. Thomas Jefferson declared our rights inalienable, meaning they are part of our humanity and that the government cannot take them from us, not even a federal prosecutor. They also say we're not required to use technical precision or specify alleged allegations or violations. Well, they certainly don't specify them. They use vague, sweeping charges. When they talk about people in their indictment, they use terms like others, known and unknown. Places are elsewhere around the world. And they refer to a series of violations without naming one specific one. Now, I would like to know how you call others, known and unknown, from elsewhere into a courtroom and question them to defend yourself. Well, of course you can't, which is why, despite the prosecution's statement, the Fifth Amendment says, not specifically naming essential and specific elements of a charge is prohibited. And the Sixth Amendment says, charges must be clear and specific. Now, the government also says that their charges don't have to match the law's definitions. Again, I ask, by what authority does a federal prosecutor get to redefine law? Certainly not in the Constitution. The Fifth Amendment's Due Process Clause says an allegation must meet the precise definition or description in the law. They also use a theory called transferred intent, which basically blames one person for the actions of another. And in this case, they're saying that a website host is criminally liable for what its users do on the site. Now, Joshua Draytell, Ross's attorney, calls this extraordinarily expansive and unprecedented. And he says that if precedent is set with this case, it puts a crack in the door for the government to go after other website hosts. Eric Goldman points out that in Forbes, he wrote an article in Forbes, that every site has some illegitimate activity somewhere, and he says that if precedent is set, it will put a chill on the internet. Paul Joseph Watson of InfoWars said that the government is using the Silk Road case as a Trojan horse to sneak in precedent that will, and I quote him, eviscerate internet freedoms and set the precedent for chilling new laws that would drastically change the face of the World Wide Web. Now, you can say it's Silk Road, people were selling drugs on that, they would never go after a legitimate site or business. Well, tell that to Federal Express, because the federal government has indicted Federal Express for drug trafficking and money laundering based on the same theory of transferred intent, because some of their customers used FedEx to ship illegal pharmaceuticals. Now I'm waiting for them to indict the United States Postal Service. But I'm not holding my breath because there's different rules for the government than there are for the rest of us, apparently. Another thing they say, rather chillingly, is the arm of the law is far longer than Ulbricht imagines it to be. And I can tell you, after my experience with all this, that it's longer than most of us imagine it to be, and it's growing longer every day. Well, what they say is bad, but what they do is worse. And I want to illustrate this to show you a little prosecutorial magic trick, and I even brought props. Perfect that Adam mentioned raw milk. Here's raw milk, a bottle of raw milk, which of course is illegal in many states because, the government wants to make these choices for us and protect us. I mean, I feel safer, don't you? Anyway, here's your crime, selling raw milk. Okay, one crime, one indictment. But then again, maybe you didn't actually sell it, and so let's just throw on aiding and abetting, just to, make sure our bases are covered. And then, well, if these two things happen, it must be a conspiracy. And, well, I think you might have mentioned it on Craigslist, so that's selling raw milk on the internet, right up here. And then, well, with all those counts, you're definitely a raw milk kingpin. So, for one bottle of milk and one sale, you get 5 crimes for the price of this one transaction, this one action. And that's how they pile on. Now, this is very prejudicial to a jury. They think, whoa, 5 counts, 5 crimes, you must be guilty. And, of course, it's very intimidating to a defendant. Hey, we've got 5 counts against you, and they are pressured to plead, sometimes to things they have not done, rather than take the risk of going to trial and losing and having much worse consequences. So piling on, that's what they do. Now, another thing they do to pile on is called surplusage, which is the use of surplus language in an indictment. It's not part of the indictment, it's not an actual charge, they just kind of talk about it. So, in this case, it's very serious, it's murder for hire. They use it to deny Ross bail. They are definitely prejudicing the jury with this language in the indictment, but it's not part of the indictment. He's not charged with it. There is an indictment in Maryland. It's over a year old. It's kind of stale. It's like, what is the expiration date? And Ross's attorney said that because the New York case is not addressing it or making it part of its case, he thinks it has no merit at all. But it's sitting there for over a year. And indictments can be based on hearsay. They don't require a lot of proof. Now my question is, they obviously love to pile on charges. So why wouldn't they take a nice juicy one like murder for hire and throw it on there if they had any evidence? Another thing they do, I call running out the clock. It's like a basketball game where you run out the clock on your opponent so he can't score. And I'm very concerned about it because what's happening is that it threatens to deprive Ross of a fair trial, which is his due process right. The trial's coming up November 10th, and he is being obstructed from seeing very essential elements of the discovery evidence, which the judge ordered that he would see. It took 5 months and 2 court hearings to get him more than even a week's worth of discovery to look at. It was only 3 weeks ago that he got a significant portion of it, and he's still being, as of yesterday when I spoke to him, being denied access to 2 more crucial parts, and the trial's a month away. And it's been an ongoing saga of botched repair jobs, omission of crucial evidence and information, faulty software, faulty formatting, all kinds of ways to deny access, and meanwhile we have to pay the lawyers to go fight them. Every time they take the laptop to repair it, it takes forever, because you know the government takes forever to do anything. And meanwhile, they say, oh, we've got new discovery. And they keep coming up with new things to pile on again, over 6 terabytes. A lot of it's useless, but you have to go through it to find the needles in the haystack. And, you know, he's being buried in this. And yet they're depriving him of very essential evidence. Well, it just makes me wonder what they don't want him to see. I could go on about that one. But anyway, I want to go on to the next one, which is issuing false statements. One of them is, I read, well, Ulbricht's had well-organized discovery for 6 months. I'm like, my jaw dropped. I'm like, right? What parallel universe are you guys living in? I'm just fighting this constantly. Another one is that the government said it didn't need a warrant for the Silk Road servers because the United States has a mutual legal assistance treaty with Iceland, or an MLAT, and so they didn't need a warrant. They said that they stated this in multiple affidavits under oath to a magistrate judge in court. But later, in a little footnote on page 3 of their September rebuttal, they go, you know, that thing about the MLATs, well, you know, it wasn't really technically correct. We don't actually have an MLAT with Iceland. Whoops. And I'm like, technically correct? I'm like, is this a new word for government speak for false? It's not technically correct? And what would happen to you or me if we said something that wasn't technically correct under oath? And did this mislead the magistrate judges who were presented with these affidavits? And then it makes me wonder, well, what else isn't technically correct? Murder for hire, perhaps? Finally, there's the explanation of how they found the Silk Road server. When ex-FBI agent Christopher Tarbell's explanation went online, there was an outcry all over the internet that, from people who understand these things, I'm not being one of them, but technical people who said, this is impossible. This isn't true. Security specialist Nick Kubrilovic set up a virtual machine simulating the claims that Tarbell made, and he said it's impossible. Try it. Cybersecurity expert Robert Graham stated publicly that he thinks Tarbell is lying and calls his declaration gibberish. Nicholas Weaver, who's a researcher at the International Computer Science Institute, said it was inconsistent with reality. The defense issued a declaration of 18 pages spelling out specifically why it was implausible. And the conclusion was, we need to have an evidentiary hearing with impartial experts to get to the truth of what the FBI is claiming. But as of yesterday, the judge issued an opinion that, well, basically that's not going to happen. In response to all this criticism, Tarbell gave the classic, the dog ate my homework excuse, and said, darn, I forgot to save my work. I have no documentation of how I found that server. Just trust me. And so we're supposed to believe that he has no records of his investigation. Not for the most important investigation, probably, of his career. I mean, is this the first time in history that the government has not generated paperwork? I would think it would be Forensics 101 that you document your investigation. Now, I don't understand how, without documentation, we can believe the evidence. I mean, just trust us is not quite enough. Which brings us to the question, what is the government hiding and why? Christopher Segoyan, who's a principal technologist at the ACLU, recently tweeted, he said, "Shame on me for giving the government investigators the benefit of the doubt. There is something seriously shady going on in the Silk Road case." Now, Ross's case is unique. This is how they prosecute people. And the American Bar Association says that a prosecutor has a duty to prosecute cases fairly. But they don't play fair. And I suggest that is a threat to all of us. You know, if you have a case, fine, make your case. But don't ignore and trample on the Constitution and rule of law to get your trophy. This is what our founders fought against. And speaking of those guys, our founders, many of them were young, the age of many of you here. They were in their teens, 20s, and 30s at the time of the Revolutionary War. And they stepped up to fight tyranny and fight for freedom, and they made history. I would suggest this is your moment in history. This is the birth of the digital age, and many things will be determined going forward now. These are issues that have not been addressed in the courts before. And this Silk Road case, for better or worse, is a battle in that moment of history. Paul Joseph Watson again said, "This case is as big a threat to internet freedom as SOPA and PIPA." Scott Greenfield, who's an attorney here in New York, wrote his blog, said, "The Silk Road case is the birth of law as applied to our digital future. Watch it as a spectator at your peril." You know, Ross is fighting this. He didn't plead when he was pressured to. In spite of the heavy intimidation and the threat of the draconian punishment that would destroy his life, he is standing up to government and their accusations. I spoke to him yesterday, and so he knew I was coming here, and he asked me to please thank everyone who has supported us this past year. And then he added, he said, "Mom, tell them to join me in this fight. We can win this, but I need their help." Precedent is going to be set, for better or worse, in this case, with this case. So I really urge you to keep your eye on what's more, don't be distracted by the sensationalism. Keep your eye on what is important here, what will really have ramifications for the future. And I'm asking you to please help us. Please visit our website, freeross.org. We have a table outside. We'll be here the rest of the day. We're happy to talk to you. We have t-shirts and other ways you can help. Please help us in this fight. Thank you.